If you wanted the fattest rear tire and the most imposing presence at the biker meet, you used to have to dig deep into your pockets. Ducati Diavel V4, 240 section rear tire, V4 engine, and all of that for just under 28,000 euros in Germany. But it's 2026 now, and there's a new player in the game, the Benda LCF 700 Pro, 300 section rear tire, air suspension, a massive presence, and all of that for just under 13,000 euros, less than half the price of the Ducati. So the question is the Benda the king of value for money when it comes to making a statement? Or is a lot of it just hot air? And with that, welcome to 1000 PSTV for a slightly different kind of video. I want to say up front, this is obviously not a straight comparison because that wouldn't be fair to either bike. The price gap is too big. The categories are different too. So if I were to crown a clear winner at the end of this video, I don't think that would be right. And that's exactly why we're not going to do that. Today, we're exploring a more fundamental question. How much bike do you actually need at the biker meet? Which bike is the best one for the ice cream shop? You could almost say, which one is the better poser bike? Though I'm being a bit unfair to one of them by saying that, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let's get started, and let's start with the most important thing, the looks, the first impression. When this rolls up at the biker meet, which one has more impact? Which one turns more heads? Let's begin with the classy one, the Ducati Diavel V4. It's been on the market for a few years now, but I don't think it's lost any of its beauty. That rear end in particular is the absolute highlight for me, with that integrated tail light, the single-sided swing arm, which has become increasingly rare on Ducatis, and of course the 4-exit exhaust that reminds me a little of a Gatling gun from one of those dodgy action films from the 60s and 70s. It's got real charm. And the Diavel up front is just as muscular and satisfying. Not to be overlooked either is that 240 section rear tire. It makes a real impression at the biker meet, where most people are rolling in with 160 and 180 tires. When you pull up on a Diavel Rosso with a 240, that turns heads. And yet, despite all that, the Diavel still manages to feel graceful, elegant. It doesn't come across as a heavy lumbering machine, which is almost a perfect segue to the Benda LCF 700 Pro. I rode the standard version last year. Our man Carlos behind the camera will be putting together a dedicated video on the Pro variant as well. So make sure you check that out, but honestly, the rear end says it all. The 300 section tire compared to the 310 on the standard model, it doesn't diminish the impression at all, quite the opposite. That's just an insane amount of rubber. You will be noticed on the road, turning heads is guaranteed, and it runs the full length of the bike. Now, I'll be honest, I'm a bit disappointed by the exhaust. On the standard version, there's just this panel with the exhaust hidden behind it, and I genuinely don't understand why Benda went with a single little exhaust pipe sticking out there. It doesn't look particularly elegant in my opinion, but I can't look past it because the front end is seriously imposing. You've got this central air intake with integrated lighting. The camera crew just said it looks like a transformer. Or a sandworm from Dune. What do you reckon, Marcel? Sandworm? Yeah, sandworm exactly. What I do find a shame about the Pro variant's visual package, and this is the thing that bothers me, are the auxiliary headlights. If you've been watching videos from other countries on YouTube, we already saw it in Spain, the Benda LCF Pro can fold out additional headlights. But that's unfortunately not road legal here in Austria and Germany. So what we've got instead are auxiliary lights that are purely decorative. They don't actually work, which means there's also a dead button on the handlebar that does absolutely nothing. We did wonder whether the wiring might still be in there somewhere and could potentially be reconnected, but either way, this feature is simply absent in our market version. You're essentially carrying dead weight, and that's a bit of a shame. So to close out this first chapter on looks and presence, the Diavel is genuinely elegant and graceful, but with real muscle behind it, while the Benda LCF is basically a punch in the face. You buy this because you want to be seen. Blending in is simply not an option. If maximum visual impact is what you're after, Benda is your answer. Now let's move on to the next chapter, which is really at the heart of this video. The price, as I mentioned in the intro, the Diavel V4 costs just under 28,000 euros in Germany. The Benda you can have for 12,999. That's less than half. So in all likelihood, not many people are going to find themselves genuinely choosing between these two bikes. The price gap is simply too wide. But you can still ask the question, what do I get for my money? And in the Benda's case, what don't I get for my money? With the Diavel, the more expensive bike in this comparison, you genuinely do get a lot for your money. There's the Gran Turismo engine, known from the Multistrada. And as you'd expect from Ducati, there's a very comprehensive electronics package. Riding modes, traction control, every electronic rider aid you could ask for, and very handy for longer journeys, cruise control. I should mention, if you notice, we've got a cable tie on ours here. On our test bike, the throttle grip had come slightly loose. I don't want to hold that against the Diavel V4 because we've tested quite a few of them and this is the first time it's happened. Ducati will sort it out when we return the bike. But in any case, you're getting a very well-spec'd machine here, a lot of value for the money, and the build quality is Ducati through and through. Everything feels premium and precise. For less than half the price, you also get the Benda, and to be fair, the components are not bad at all. There's an inline 4-cylinder putting out just under 80 horsepower, and you can already feel it working a bit harder against a curb weight of 299 kilograms. More on that in a moment, but otherwise the equipment is decent enough. There's a TFT display on board which presents the data nicely, and you can also make adjustments to the air suspension from there. What is missing though is any real depth of customization. No riding modes, no cruise control. It's fairly rudimentary. With the Benda, you jump on, turn the key on the side, fire up the inline 4 and off you go. No fuss. So yes, for the price difference, you're definitely getting less electronics and fewer features. But I wouldn't say the overall build quality or the presence of the bike is worse. The aluminium frame with that striking surface finish, I've only seen that on the standard model before and it looks spectacular. And on the subject of build quality, in my standard LCF 700 video, I mentioned that the tank fairing would creak with every movement. That's gone on this Pro version. Benda have clearly addressed it and credit to them for that. So what do you get for half the money? Yes, significantly less, but I wouldn't call it a bad product. The old cliche that China only makes cheap tat is well and truly dead. Chinese motorcycles have come a very long way, and the LCF 700 Pro is a fine example of that. On to the next chapter, the tire factor. As I mentioned in the intro, 300 versus 240. It's a bit of a who's got the bigger rear tire competition, let's be honest. Whether you actually need it is a question I'll leave open. But what you can say with absolute certainty is that the difference in ride dynamics is massive. A 300 section rear tire on an extremely wide rim. You have to work to get that through a corner. Riding the Benda, and this is actually pretty contrary to what you'd want from a cruiser, is not exactly relaxing. When you're on it, you have to be constantly switched on. Going through a corner, you have to push on the bar continuously. You can't just let it flow because the moment you ease off the pressure, the bike immediately wants to stand back up again. This motorcycle simply wants to go in a straight line. It'll go around a corner, it will, and yes, it'll scrape at some point. But the combination of long wheelbase, very shallow steering geometry, a 300 section rear, and a measured weight of 299 kilograms means that this bike needs to be actively steered. You cannot just settle in and relax. On a twisty road, you don't get a moment's rest. So I was all the more surprised when I jumped on the Diavel today, because in my head, the Diavel has always been a substantial bike, a big, imposing machine, more in the power naked category, not the most sporting thing out there. But compared to the Benda, the Diavel V4 feels like a toy. It's so nimble, so playful. Even with that 240 section rear tire, this is a bike you can push beautifully through corners. You don't have to be intimidated by the weight. We measured ours at 239 kilograms, and the rear tire isn't going to fight you around bends. Ducati have really engineered this thing so you can ride it with real intent, which makes the Diavel V4 even more fascinating to me. It looks like a power naked bike, it sits like one. The knee angle is fairly relaxed, not aggressive, and yet it still carves corners, feels light to move, and at 1.75 meters with short legs, I've got no problems with reach or footing. I can stand flat and move the bike easily underneath me. The Diavel V4 is genuinely the surprise package of the power naked world. It looks massive and imposing, but it moves in a way that's genuinely sporty and enjoyable. So in this comparison, when it comes to actually riding, the Diavel wins comfortably. I can sit on it for a full day and step off feeling fine, knowing it handles corners with ease. On the LCF, after what's 15 minutes, maybe an hour, I step off with aching arms from the sheer effort of muscling it through bends. When you're talking about cruisers and power naked bikes, the engine is obviously key. You can't just look the part, there has to be something behind it. Nobody wants a dull, lifeless motor. Let's start with the Benda. As I've said, it's an inline 4-cylinder, which is already very unusual for a cruiser. Just under 700 cubic centimeters on board, 86 horsepower and 60 Newton meters of torque. The character of it is odd because when you hear this thing approaching, you think a super bike is coming, like a 600 cubic centimeter super sport. And then it turns the corner and there's a cruiser in front of you. It just doesn't add up. And when you actually rev it out, the vibrations become very noticeable too, especially through the foot pegs where it starts to get uncomfortable. The issue is the 299 kilogram curb weight. You have to rev the engine hard to get the thing moving with any real purpose, and then the motor starts to struggle. The weight is high, so you rev it, shift, click, click, into the next gear. But the Benda doesn't really surge forward. On the engine front, it's a bit of a hybrid, sounds incredibly sporty, but in terms of actual forward drive, it has more of a relaxed cruiser attitude than the sound would suggest. The Diavel V4 is almost the exact opposite. The Gran Turismo engine we know from the Multistrada, 168 horsepower, more than double the torque at 126 Newton meters, and it just marches forward beautifully. What I love about the Diavel is that you can genuinely ride it in a relaxed way too. In touring mode, it just cruises effortlessly. You can modulate the throttle really smoothly, something the Benda doesn't do as well. The Diavel's power never overwhelms you. You can poodle around all day if you want, but when you do want to crack it open, I think Nabben did just that. Check out his video. This engine really delivers. It pulls strongly, it's refined, and it sounds fantastic. It's a brilliant motor, and there's a very good reason Ducati puts it in so many of their models. It works, it's compact enough not to get in the way, and it's genuinely fun. So both bikes do actually deliver on their respective categories. The Benda more as a cruiser, the Diavel more as a power naked bike. The Diavel wants to go, it wants to move, but it can also be calm when you need it to be. The Benda is more relaxed, and if I'm honest, with that big inline 4 sound and that visual presence, it's more style over substance. But before I get to the conclusion, I want to talk about one very important feature of the Benda, really the showpiece of this motorcycle. Let me turn around so you can see it better. The air suspension. We've actually seen air suspension on a Benda before, on the Dark Flag 500 V4 cruiser, which Poke tested. Right, the bike's taking a moment to lift me up. Carlos is already laughing behind the camera, but I can feel it, we're pumping up. The idea of this feature is to offer extra comfort because it adapts. You can adjust the setup via the display and sport or comfort, and you can also set it to your preferred ride height. There's a standard setting and a taller setting for bigger riders. Though honestly, more air in the suspension for taller riders. I'm not sure I see the big benefit there because the geometry doesn't actually change. But the real party piece is what happens when you stop. Park it up and it sinks down. Everyone standing nearby reaches out instinctively because they're convinced it's about to fall over. It doesn't. The system is stable and it's actually pretty entertaining. You notice it at traffic lights too. It lowers itself again so you get a solid footing. At 1.75 meters, I have absolutely no trouble getting my feet down anyway, but it's a fun bit of kit. Whether it genuinely offers more comfort than the standard model, you'd need a direct back-to-back test to say for sure. In isolation, the suspension is actually on the firmer side rather than plush, but as a party piece for 13,000 euros, it's a genuine highlight of the Benda LCF 700 Pro. Right, time for a conclusion. Even though I said this isn't a straight comparison, you'll have noticed a few parallels inevitably come up when you're riding two motorcycles back to back, and I don't want to say one is better than the other. What I want to answer is simply, which bike offers more posing potential for the money? The Ducati Diavel V4, just under 28,000 euros, that is a significant sum, but when you show up on one, every biker and pretty much every person on the planet will know this person means business. This is a stunning Italian motorcycle with a single-sided swing arm, a V4 engine, a brilliant spec sheet, and above all, a design that is absolutely timeless, something that will still look magnificent in 20 years' time. What you're buying with the Diavel is a piece of craftsmanship, a beautiful motorcycle that looks just as good parked outside the opera as it does in a cold underground car park. It always works. The Benda, on the other hand, is a proper eye-catcher. If you want to be noticed, this is your weapon, and it doesn't matter where you are. Whether you're riding through Vienna and taxi drivers are following you just to give you a thumbs up, as Carlos told me happened to him, or whether you're standing in a car park collecting curious looks, this bike delivers every time. I also think the Benda is doing something genuinely important. It's helping to dismantle the prejudice against Chinese bikes because this thing is bold. It's not copying anyone. It's completely its own thing. Buying a Benda is buying a piece of extravagance, a statement that you don't want to disappear into the crowd. Yes, it's considerably cheaper. Yes, it probably doesn't ride as athletically as the Ducati, but it is a statement bike, and I think it's exactly the right motorcycle for someone who already has something sporty in the garage and now wants a cruiser. Just not the standard off-the-shelf stuff. Something you rarely see, something genuinely special. I hope this slightly different kind of comparison has given you something to take away. Maybe you've learned something about these two bikes. Maybe I've even inspired you to head down to your local Ducati dealer or your local Benda dealer and take one for a spin. I told Marcel, our social media guy, today, go and ride the Benda. You have to experience it for yourself before you can really talk about it, and he did ride it. His enthusiasm is still growing, shall we say. But I'll get him on it for a few more kilometers yet. In all seriousness, I'd urge you to try both of these bikes because both of them will surprise you and both of them will put a smile on your face. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss anything. There are also individual videos on both bikes, so don't miss those either. Until next time, cheers and goodbye.